Hi. Hello, hello, hello. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. So excited to have everyone here on Valentine's Day and just in general to talk about all things faith and OCD and advocating on OCD in faith communities. We're going to jump in just a second, but just want to welcome all of you. As you come in, feel free to say hello in the chat and tell us where you're from. And as we're waiting for folks to come in, I know we always do a question of the night. I would love for Valentine's Day. I don't know. I've been talking with folks a lot about, in addition to love of others, self-love and self-compassion today. So if folks have a favorite self-compassion practice, I would love to hear what that looks like. So in the chat, favorite self-compassion practice. And if any of our panelists have a favorite self-compassion practice that you want to share, feel free to jump in.
I like to give myself some nice reading time before I go to sleep. That's my go-to.
I love that.
It's not very original, but there it is.
No, that's an awesome self-compassion practice.
Thank you. Thank you for reassuring me.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things to do too,
Right.
Justine, to read and write.
Yeah.
Maybe have a cup of coffee. And sometimes on my really down days, I go on what I call a praise walk, only because it helps me clear my mind. And I just like, looking at nature. But that's usually what I do.
I love that. Thanks, Val. Justin or Alex, do y'all have one?
Yeah, it's honestly, it's an area that I've been growing in a lot myself personally. But one of the things that I do on the clinical and personal side, sometimes it's just starting with labeling what is the statement that I want to sit with. So obviously, we'll talk about maybe sitting with distress, but sometimes I make things way too complicated in my brain. And so just sitting with that, and for me, it can certainly be a scripture, but it might be a piece of encouraging material. Reading can be really, really useful. So just starting simply with what I need to sit with, what I need to hear in that moment, which at any moment it could be you're loved. At any moment it may be there is grace, or there's no condemnation, or whatever it happens to be. So I think just starting with whatever is simple, because my brain makes it complex.
I very much relate to that, Justin. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Alex, do you have a self-compassion practice?
Much less profound, but I kind of like removing myself from other people and listening to music on either my phone or playing piano. And kind of there's a room nearby the college dorms where there's just a piano. I love people, but I think I've come to understand that when I'm over stimulus, it's a little bit too much for me. So I need to set my own kind of limits to rewind.
I think, it's funny you said that wasn't a profound thing. I actually think that's a very profound thing for you to know about yourself, and that you need to take that time. That's really significant. I would say for me, a lot of folks know running for me is such a self-compassion piece. Honestly, one of my favorite things is connecting with God and the universe and all sorts of different things out with my feet pounding the pavement. And that's such a component for me. And I see folks in the chat. Thank you, some folks for sharing. I see already conversations around the spiritual path and Buddhism and meditation and prayer being so significant. Self-compassion, a great movie with a hot chocolate. Yeah. Kristen Neff's Compassion Break #2. If anybody here is not familiar with Kristen Neff, all of her self-compassion exercises are just fantastic. Yeah, I love this. Self-compassion isn't tied to anything physical or sensual, even though that can help be a bridge. It's just tapping into the immortal, loving awareness that permeates all existence. Beautiful. So thank y'all so much for kind of starting this conversation on self-compassion. We're going to get into a bigger conversation on faith and OCD and all of those things tonight. But first, I just want to note that this live stream is educational and is not intended to replace therapy. For treatment-related questions, please work with your provider or contact a local clinician. You can use the IOCDF's online resource directory at iocdf.org/findhelp to locate a trained clinician near you. The International OCD Foundation is not a crisis hotline. If you're in crisis or if you're ever feeling suicidal or unsafe, please go to your local emergency room or call 911 or the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988. You can also access online at www.988lifeline.org. And finally, we want to create as safe a space as possible. We want to be kind and respectful to everyone. At the end of the day, we are all here to support one another, but do want to let you know that this is being broadcast on several social media platforms and is being recorded. So just keep that in mind as you comment and respond to one another. But one of my favorite things is the fact that always on these, y'all are so fantastic to one another in the chat. And that's a part of this advocacy and a part of this conversation too. So as we move through, please engage, please ask questions, and we'll try to engage with you as much as possible tonight. So I'm just going to go through who we have here tonight because we have some awesome human beings here so that you know who you are hearing from. And I guess for anybody who doesn't know me, I am Katie O'Dunn. I always like to note there's a reverend in front of my name because I'm an ordained minister, but I am super informal and you are welcome to just call me Katie. The reason I like to put that is I do, in fact, like folks to know that ordained ministers and clergy can, in fact, have OCD and can seek clinical mental health treatment. So I'm an ordained minister and clinical chaplain specializing in the intersection between faith and OCD. I founded Faith and Mental Health Integrative Services and really work full-time in the area of religious scrupulosity alongside clinicians across faith traditions. I have OCD, and I'm a proud IOCDF lead advocate alongside a lot of amazing humans, including Valerie Andrews, who's one of our panelists tonight. So Valerie is a retired school teacher and full-time wife, mother, and grandmother. Following her OCD diagnosis in 2011, she began advocating in hopes of bringing awareness and inclusion within her own community and communities of faith. Today, she spends a majority of her time focusing on her nonprofit, Miss Mabel Sparrows, which is a nonprofit for women of age, color, and faith. And her goal is to continue working as an IOCDF advocate and promoting change. She's also starting a brand new IOCDF support group and special interest group focusing on older adults. And I know she would be very enthusiastic for anyone here to reach out to her who wants to be a part of that. Then we have absolutely. Thanks for being here, Val. We have Justin, who is the owner of Dallas Counseling, and he is a clinician and writer passionate about helping those impacted by OCD. He serves on the IOCDF's OCD and Faith Task Force and is the Dallas ambassador for OCD Texas. Working with a diversity of clients, he is also dual trained in psychology and theology, regularly helping anyone to understand the interaction between faith and OCD, most commonly Christians. And always we encourage you to check out justinkHughes.com to stay in the loop and to get free guides and handouts, which are always fantastic and awesome. Then we have Justine, who is a Canadian living with OCD, having been diagnosed at the age of 20. Originally from Winnipeg, I always get this wrong, Manitoba, right? Yes. Okay. She now resides in Ottawa, Ontario with her wife. She is a co-facilitator for her local goal support group, and is involved in 2 IOCDF special interest groups, the Faith and Mental Health group and the LGBTQ+ groups. Justine works in political action for a Canadian labor organization and is an advocate for progressive social and economic policies. She holds a BA in economics and political studies from the University of Manitoba and an MA in public administration from Carleton University. She is dedicated to expanding access to evidence-based mental health care by reducing stigma around mental illness and removing financial barriers to care. And I know there's a lot of stuff that's not on here, including like Justine really trying to get OCD advocacy going in Canada in different ways. So I know there's just a ton of awesome stuff that she is doing. And then we have Alex. Alex Rosenberg is a college student studying psychology at Columbia University. He has been an active IOCDF advocate from an early age and is currently particularly engaged in advocacy pertaining to his challenges with OCD as a young adult and as a person of the Jewish faith. He has spoken at the IOCDF's annual conferences and Faith and OCD conferences, as well as IOCDF YouTube live streams. He is also a member of the IOCDF's Faith and OCD and Young Adult Special Interest Group and a new member of our Faith and OCD Task Force. and he wants to support others in finding hope to take their meaningful lives back from OCD, just as others have provided similar support to him. And as I make sure to say every time, he also got the Youth Hero Award this past year at the conference. So Alex is a rock star.
Why do you keep mentioning that?
I will never stop.
You deserve it.
You do deserve it because I'm proud of you. Okay. So I am excited to jump in with everybody tonight. And I'm going to start with just a general question, and we'll go through the group. Then we have some more specific questions. Again, folks in the chat, please ask questions too, and I'll make sure to integrate those. But with our topic, I really just want to start out and hear everyone's unique and wonderful perspectives on why it's important to talk about OCD in faith communities. So why is it important to talk about OCD in faith communities? And I'll just note, one of the reasons this topic came up is Valerie has done a really great job in some of our groups recently of talking about the fact that we have a lot of conversations about religious scrupulosity, but it's not just about scrupulosity in faith communities. There are lots of different subtypes that we need to be talking about. We need to be talking about this overall experience of OCD and treatment, destigmatizing in these communities. So yeah, why is this so important? And Val, since I just mentioned all your great work on this, I'll start with you if you want to share why you think it's important to have these conversations.
I think, thank you. And I think it's important because there's such a need. I know for myself, for me, it all started with the thought of starting a conversation between two communities that I love, my community of faith and my community of OCD sufferers. And I started in my head thinking about in the pews, trying to reach so many people who are suffering, who are sitting in the pews and not saying anything. And I simply wanted to start a conversation and get that conversation going. And beyond that, I didn't have any other objective, because for me, I felt it was so important as a Christian or as a person of faith to be able to bring my issues to church with me, because they were coming anyhow. You know, once I left the pews, once I went beyond the pews, it was still there. And so I had all of this stuff going on in my head, and I didn't know where or how to foster it, because I was getting not so much in my own church family, but I was getting so much stigma and negative vibes from the church community in general that we're even afraid to mention the word mental illness. You know, we talk about everything but that. And so for me, I just knew from a personal experience that I was sitting in that pew every Sunday, every month, every year. I felt loved, but I didn't feel understood. I didn't feel I was being seen. I didn't feel that my church community could pray for me, because I couldn't speak about mental illness. You know, it was like, how can you pray for me if you don't know what to pray for? And so for me, that was the catalyst of everything important to me with OCD and faith, to bring those two communities together where we can simply have a conversation and have that conversation continue outside of the pews. Mm-hmm. And so, and only because, like I said, I had such a need. I was sitting in silent suffering, mm-hmm. You know, and as a faithful member of my church body, there was something wrong with that. Mm-hmm. You know, so that's why my journey started.
Mm. That's great, Valerie. Every time I hear you talk, I just want like a night that's Valerie Andrews. Can we do that?
We totally do
just
that.
Valerie going off. And I was thinking of a response at first where it was thinking I needed to answer clinically, but actually let me start on the relational side, because even though I don't have OCD, it was the people that drew me into this work. And that's why I work with OCD. I love the people that I work with. And so that really relational side, seeing that people were suffering and needing solutions, drew me in. And then as to the clinical piece, I think it's really simple that OCD gets into faith and religious belief and spirituality. I think it's as simple as that. If it goes there, then on the clinical side, we need to go there too, appropriately. We're figuring out ways to do that and working those things out different ways. But generally speaking, it can be done really, really well. And it is a little unique compared to sometimes other domains, especially in the clinical realm. So if you have panic disorder or phobias or fill in the blank, there are some areas that you may never have to talk to a therapist or clinician or support person about faith components, because you might be able to knock it out and take care of what you need to take care of. And generally I see that, and if it's as simple as that. But one of my favorite things to say about OCD is that it's the disorder of disorders when it comes to fear, because any human fear can be implicated. It's not just focused on social. It's not just focused on fear of getting stuck, agoraphobia, claustrophobia, some people reference it. It's not just the singular focus or a few things. Generalized anxiety, which I have, focuses on the current worries of the day, but OCD shows up in, you don't feel clean enough? Yeah, you're going to get a disease. And by the way, you probably blasphemed God by not thinking about this in the right way. Oh yeah, by the way, you're also probably a murderer. And here's an extra thing. It really bounces around. And so clinically, it need not surprise us that it's going to focus on matters of faith, spirituality, religion, etc. And so we have to go there as well in recovery.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Justin. Yeah, Justine, go ahead and chime in on why this is important. I love these perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said wholeheartedly. I suppose also, though, places of worship, of spirituality, of spiritual practice, oftentimes there are leaders in those spaces, and those leaders, I think a lot of the time, really want to serve their congregation well, and don't necessarily always have the tools to recognize, they're not trained psychologists, generally speaking. There might be some crossover there, but, to recognize, something as OCD. And we know that a lot of folks with OCD or other mental illnesses might seek supports from faith leaders before perhaps going to a mental health provider. And so it's important to build these links between kind of clinicians and faith leaders, so that those folks can work together to help people who are seeking supports, people who are suffering. So really, I mean, it's important to advocate in faith communities, because faith communities matter to people, and where there are people, there will be struggle and people wanting to help. So it's a good place to connect.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Justine. And that's a great, we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, the faith leader piece, and then some of what the IOCDF is doing and how y'all can plug in with that as well. Alex, go ahead. I know you have lots of
thoughts. And to kind of build off what Justine was saying, I think one of the best reasons to advocate for OCD in faith communities is because it's possible and it makes a difference. And I think, in my experience, I know of a lot of people who have actually been more supportive of me than I had expected. I do know of cases in which, things can be more complicated, but I do think that even in some of the more tough cases, there are a lot of solutions that can be found. And that especially goes back to communication, tools, and also self-advocacy. And also towards holding out hope, I think.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alex. So I'm seeing lots of dialogue in the comments, which makes me really happy that folks are really engaged with what's being said. And want to build on this a little bit, and some of actually what's already been talked about, but go a little bit deeper. And I wanted to start with Val to ask, how can we raise awareness about OCD and its impact on individuals in faith communities? And the reason I want to share this, a lot of the things that we're doing with the IOCDF now, whether it's the faith conferences or some of the things that we've built out, are because Val had this beyond the pews vision that folks are talking about in the chat. And we are now able to start raising awareness around this because of that vision. So yeah, so Val, how do you think we can raise awareness about OCD and the way that it impacts individuals in faith communities?
I think for me, it goes back to what I was saying, just having a conversation. Because when I started with my In the Pews, I kind of wanted to fix everything, but then when I really reflected on it, everything has to start with a conversation. And my goal was to keep that conversation going. And I simply started for myself with doing, say, Wednesday night prayer time. I would pray for people with mental illness, or I would ask, could I bring in some literature? Or I would try to find ways to bring it up in conversation, like, hey, July is National Minority Mental Health Month. Are we doing anything? Those sort of things. And even beyond that, when I think about it, I really started the conversations with my inner circle. Maybe a friend or two. I remember asking somebody to go out for coffee just because I needed to talk. And so I don't think there's really a wrong or right way to do it. I just think, like it says, simply having a conversation is a start. And sometimes that's all we need to kind of get the ball rolling. But for me, it was simple. I just started trying to be transparent. And I know everybody aren't able or willing to do that. For me, I think it had a lot to do with what I said with age, because I had been sitting in those pews for so long, being silent. I kind of felt my time was running out. And so I just started with a conversation. And I literally started with raising my hand on Wednesday night saying, hey, can we pray for me and everybody else with a mental illness? And it kind of just blossomed from there.
Thank you. Thank you, Val.
I truly think that, if we love something or love someone, that it's a natural outflow to just talk about that, and how much that lifts off the pressure, Valerie, to think of it as a conversation. And the best conversations I've had in this realm are just that. It's a conversation. It's not the pressure. I don't need to force something or jam an agenda down a person's throat. I think most recently I went a couple weekends ago to my church's men's retreat, and it was just so natural for people who are like, well, what do you do? Which sometimes I'm hesitant. It's kind of like there's a joke between therapists. Be careful if you're on a plane and somebody says, what do you do for a living? I'm a therapist.
Clergy joke. You're like, don't tell anybody.
Oh man, I've got brother of mine. I need to, or the opposite response if they sit further away. But it's so easy to just be like, yeah, I'm an OCD and anxiety specialist. And people are like, And I even had a conversation with a psychologist who's not super well versed in treatments of OCD at this retreat. And he was soaking it up. He's like, okay, so how do you do ERP for this? And with others was talking about the intersection between faith and OCD. And I love the ease of knowing that it can just be a conversation. It lifts a lot of pressure off and can really just point the focus towards these things that I love anyway.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Justin. And I was gonna, take that, and Justine, feel free to tack onto this too. But I also wanted to ask, you brought up the faith leader piece a little while ago. I wonder, if we've done some things with the IOCDF, and you're part of the SIG who's doing some work around this too. But what might be helpful both for faith leaders, but also just in general with making communities more accessible and inclusive for individuals with OCD. And I know professionally, this is some of the work that you do as well. And so what does that look like to create these spaces that are inclusive for individuals?
Yeah. As a quick aside, no one on a plane or anywhere cares when there's an economist sitting next to them, but that's okay. And actually, to that point, I do think a big part of it, I mean, certainly it's psychoeducation, right? It's expanding awareness of what the disorder is, of, who it impacts, how it manifests, that kind of thing. But I think to Val and Justin's points, so much of that is more compelling, and this is coming from an economist, not by saying, 1 in 100 Americans or whatever the stat is currently, or this many, that stuff's helpful and it can, supplement, I think, personal storytelling, but it is that personal storytelling piece that's oftentimes, I think, going to be the most compelling, including for faith leaders, right? It's, there are people in my congregation who are suffering with this, and, I care about that, and I want to show up for them. Perhaps they themselves, are suffering with this without being aware. And so, and it takes a lot of courage in a lot of cases for people to speak up about their struggles with OCD. But I really do think it's really impactful. So yeah, I think we need that technical education, certainly a little bit around, the warning signs, what resources are available, the kind of how you can work with local clinicians to develop, treatment plans that are affirming of someone's spiritual or faith beliefs while being effective. But yeah, also just kind of trying to open that space up for discussion and for storytelling that's not rooted in shame, because that's where the impact's really going to hit, much as I love statistics.
And I love that that's not rooted in shame. What a significant piece. And Alex, for you to add on to that too, I would also love for you to share a little bit about your experience with opening up to faith leaders, because you have had and we are seeing already in the chat, let's see, Deleuze is talking about the significance of encouraging faith leaders to be a part of that conversation because they're often on the front line. And you've actually had a really great interaction with your rabbi and with your faith community throughout your OCD journey. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit more to the interaction with faith leaders in this process.
Yeah, so I think, as Justine was saying, some of this has to do with courage, and some of it also, I would add, has to do with hope. And in my experience, there's been a lot of cases in which I've had difficulty seeing, how is this going to get better if I talk to this person? Is the person really going to listen to me? What if I, hear like a perspective that is harmful, or what if a whole lot of things? And in the moment, it's really hard to feel that. But I think that holding on to some degree of hope, telling myself, you know what, let's give it a try and see. And, my experience has been, I've talked to my rabbi in many cases. I told him what my therapist has told me, and I've told my therapist, there have been times where I did need to self-advocate, and I need to tell the therapist, I think you think that this is OCD, but it's actually not OCD, or vice versa. And, I've had similar conversations with my rabbi, and they were a lot more understanding of each other than I really expected. And I really do think that a lot of people who I've talked to have gone through a similar experience where, there is some need for courage, there's some need for self-advocacy, and there are going to be times when, it's important to just say a word or two and to speak up. But ultimately, that one word or two actually makes a really big difference. And so I think, first of all, it's very much possible to develop this kind of a relationship and communication. And second of all, in cases where a little bit more effort needs to be given, it's very, I think, doable. And so I would just say, keep on hoping, because it works out a lot better than it can feel like it ever will, even in your imagination, I really think.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that message of hope, Alex, and for others to feel like they can, in fact, have those conversations. And I wonder, as we're talking about kind of getting these conversations started, I know folks in the chat are maybe thinking, well, how could I actually have this conversation in my faith community? I think it's also important to know where we can point to resources. We start to share stories, but being able to point back to something can be really significant. And Justin, I would love if you can speak to some of the resources that exist, especially because you've been such an instrumental part of our Faith and OCD task force in developing some of the IOCDF resources around this. So if you could speak a little bit to the resource page, but also just resources that are helpful for folks who might be navigating.
Yeah, absolutely. So growing list at this point. So International OCD Foundation as a part of Faith and OCD work, task force, the SIG, special interest group, developing materials and resources. And y'all keep coming back because there's a lot that's in the works. We're just getting started this year as we're having the 3rd annual conference. We're really excited. So we're planning talks and it's so cool to see the seamlessness between even the different groups. Yeah, iocdf.org/faith-OCD. And a great place to start. We've tried to be really intentional with the resources that we have to try to speak into different faith communities or non-religious or nuns, sometimes self-identified, to really say, hey, this is how OCD actually shows up. And there's somebody, hopefully, that's kind of giving a little bit of voice from your community. And if we don't have that yet, well, one of two things. Let us know or jump on the special interest group or get involved in the task force with it. So a little plug there. Great place to start. And then we have a ton of additional resources. So I try to very carefully curate things, pass it along to clients, and come across any number of resources. Most commonly work with Christians in the specifics, but I really work with a diversity of clients. And so because I'm a CBT clinician, I oftentimes talk about functional analysis, looking at the function of a behavior or sometimes thought process, how it's working for a person. And so those resources can really be wide and varied. Sometimes it might not even be an OCD-centric book. Maybe it's Valerie Andrews has quoted Amy Simpson before, who talks about how mental illness is the no casserole illness. You get the casserole at the door if you're struggling with any number of things, but OCD, not so much. So there's a lot of wide and varied resources, and I could start, listing off websites, but many of those are referenced anyway in the OCD and Faith page.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. We are super, super proud of that page. And to echo what Justin said, would encourage folks to go over there. But if you see things, there is a track there or there are resources for faith leaders and for individuals with OCD and for clinicians. And we have things specific to different faith traditions. But as Justin said, if you see, or if you don't see something that you would like to see, this is not by any means exclusive work. The door is open, and please come in and engage with us and be a part of it. That's a big piece.
If you don't see yourself in there, not to say that we're completely exhaustive and all-knowing, not at all, but we probably have talked about that as well, because we've talked about a lot of the missing pieces and breaking down denominationally and different beliefs and views and so forth. So a couple of thoughts coming out of this and back to part of what's been shared already by Alex and Justine, Valerie, Katie, is that being able to speak up, to try, as Alex was talking about. I love exposure therapy. I utilize it in my own personal life, even though I don't have OCD. And I have my own reticence, even at this level, even at the point when I'm doing live streams and talks and presentations and fill in the blank, where I'm usually pretty comfortable with that stuff. I still have my own nervousness. How's this going to go? Holding back. And when I reference like the men's retreat, I was like scared too for my own set of reasons. Like, okay, like how much do I talk about this and throw myself out there? And trying just that simple, just that small step, trying. And so wherever you find yourself here, there's got to be you reference SMART goals, a specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, tangible thing. it doesn't have to look like this. You don't have to be as cool as Alex or, as I could go through with all the compliments, but ultimately start where you are. And maybe it's just jumping on a web page, and maybe it's just emailing that to somebody else and saying, hey, can I talk about this? I think it's remarkably simple. And most people, in my experience, are on the side that there's at least a willingness to have a conversation. I'm not going to universally broadcast that it's always safe to have open conversations with anybody. Duh. Obviously, it's not. But more often than not, talking to Alex, talking to Valerie, and other advocates, and hearing from Justine today, excellent emphasis that most of the time, clergy, especially those in leadership positions, are one to kind of understand and grasp that. And so just coming in, sometimes it helps to know, hey, if you just try it, see how it goes.
I love that encouragement for folks. And I know Molly's saying in the chat that just how vulnerable and authentic you're being. And for folks really to hear, we can, again, have these conversations. And it's scary. I love that you said it doesn't mean that it's safe all the time. And that's, but I know I talk on this often as well. For me, the reason I am so open about my OCD is because I wasn't for such a long time. I had a lot of shame around that. Early in ministry, I had a mentor who said, don't seek treatment, right? Don't let anybody in ministry find out that you have OCD because you won't be respected in the field. And that was really detrimental to me for a very long time. And it took 5 or 6 years of school chaplaincy with students, watching them battle their own mental health struggles while I was battling my own in secret in treatment at night, to finally feel like, wait, I should be speaking out. I can speak out as their faith leader, as their chaplain. And it was terrifying. I thought, what are they going to think of me if they know that I have intrusive thoughts or that I'm stuck on particular thoughts? Are they not going to respect me as a minister? Are people not going to want me to work with their children? And it was so much the opposite. It was for the first time hearing from families saying, oh, we can actually tell you what's going on in our household now. How can you help us have conversations with our rabbi, with our priest, with our imam? And it was almost that they trusted me more as a chaplain because they actually knew I was struggling with real life things and we could talk about them in a spiritual way. So just always like sharing that, even from the faith leader perspective, that it was terrifying for me. And I am so, so glad now to be surrounded by so many amazing advocates like are here tonight, and so many of you in the chat who want to have these conversations. And thank you for the kind words on the faith and OCD page that so many folks here have worked on too. We appreciate that. I want to ask everybody, and we can kind of just go around and see where this goes. And then we're going to dive into some chat questions. But I also wonder what misconceptions about OCD exist within faith communities. I know this can be a big question. We've seen both in faith communities, but also in a lot of articles recently, some misconceptions around OCD. But if any, what misconceptions might exist within faith communities, and how do you think we might be able to combat those in ways that are compassionate? How can we say, oof, that is not necessarily what OCD is? And so I wonder if you all have personally or clinically had that experience with a misunderstanding of OCD and how we might be able to reframe that. Go ahead, Val.
I think for me, within my own personal experience and within the church and within the Black church, is all that comes together. I think it was the sense because it goes back to what Justin says, it's seen as the no casserole disease. It's not respected. It's in your head. You can pull yourself up, pray it away, all of those things that were where I felt when I was sitting in those pews was required of me, but not of the same person that might had high blood pressure or somebody that had cancer. Those were the respected disorders because it wasn't a mental thing. And I think so often with the church, we can't separate the two. We don't see it as a disease or a mental illness. We see it as something that we can control. And so I think that's such a big uh, misconception. And once I learned myself that how I kind of got around it and made it okay for myself to feel better, it was like, well, if anybody in this congregation is taking aspirin for a headache or a cold tablet, anything else, what's the difference? I'm taking medicine for what I need to help me get along, and not feel that I struggle with being open because you get so judged by it. And I know for me, it was this saying, I'm too stressed, I'm too blessed to be stressed. And that was so convicting to me because here I was sitting, in the church every Sunday, and I was stressed. And it was like, well, what's wrong with me? Am I not good enough? Am I doing something wrong? I didn't get a casserole. Nobody is saying, hey, let's send her a card. All of those things was so heavy laden on me personally that, like I said, that's how the advocacy really got started. And now I forgot the question. And I went on a rampage.
Oh, it's just you're hitting it. It's just misconceptions that come up and how we might be
Yes.
able to address those. Yeah.
Yeah, that is not a medical diagnosis. That's my biggest thing. It is. My OCD is a diagnosable condition, not a head condition.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Val. I wonder from others. Oh, Justine, go ahead to chime in on this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we hear commonly, right, is that it's sometimes treated as a faith issue and not an OCD issue. And in fact, it's the opposite, right? OCD is sometimes attacking our faith or our relationship with our religious practice. And so, I mean, a way that could be kind of hopefully spun around is, okay, well, what's the function of the activity that you're engaging in, be it prayer, being scripture, being discussion or thought or that kind of thing. There's a point where it becomes compulsive, like with anything that OCD attacks, right? There's a point where it becomes compulsive. And I've heard it on another webinar said, but someone who's washing their hands 100 times, we don't necessarily think that they're cleaner than anyone else. They're engaging in compulsions. And similarly, if you start to understand what OCD is and how it can manifest, you can realize that, it's not an issue of, oh, they're not praying hard enough, or they said the same prayer 100 times to get it just right. It's not that they are more, showing more devotion to God, or that they are more kind of spiritually inclined. They're engaging in compulsions. And so, to flip it around is that faith-based practice can, in some cases, actually serve as a really strong motivator for treatment, a really strong complement to treatment. But that's where it's really important, I think, to work with a clinician as well as perhaps faith leaders in combination to kind of figure out that balance and where things kind of cross a line into compulsive territory, so that people can actually have a better relationship with their faith. We hear a lot of times, not just about compulsions that are more kind of active and visible, like prayer, for example, in some cases, but also things like avoidance, right? Just, I'm not going to engage in services anymore, in these things that I used to value because they're so triggering. And so it actually, treatment can allow you to return back to a healthier and more fulfilling spiritual practice in a lot of cases.
Thank you. I'm gonna hang on to that piece, and we're gonna come back to it in just a second, because we had a couple questions in the chat about spirituality and treatment and what that looks like. So thank you for bringing that in. But Alex, I'll let you speak to kind of the stigma and misconception piece first.
Yeah, so I think on kind of maybe the flip side of what Justine was saying, I think there's also a misconception that, if you go to therapy, that means you'll have to reject certain aspects of your faith. I don't think that's true. And although I've been certainly worried about that in quite a few times, I really do think that a lot of therapy that has been done and that people are doing, the intention really seems to be open-minded and also culturally competent. That's something that I'm actually learning a lot about in one of my abnormal psychology classes, is this really big emphasis on cultural competence, and on kind of keeping an unbiased perspective where I really feel like my therapist and therapists of people I know really care, and care in an open and non-judgmental way. That's really the experience that I've had. And I know a lot of other people have had that experience. I also know of quite a bit of, even very traditional Jewish literature on certain aspects of therapy and therapeutic practice, and understanding OCD and mental illness, as a separate disorder, and special needs, even as far back as certain Talmudic sources and whatnot. I think that there is a lot of impetus both in faith communities and also in therapeutic communities for a kind of synthesis of the two. And so I think that's a significant thing to think about.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alex. And I think the really exciting thing is, I believe to what Alex is saying with the cultural competence piece as well, that both your clinicians and your faith leaders want to be a part of these conversations. And I see that day in and day out. I teach, a big part of my job is I teach OCD specialists interfaith literacy for ERP, and teach about different faith traditions, how we can incorporate an understanding into exposures. And never once have I met someone in a clinic who said, I don't want to learn about that. Everything is, how can I learn more about different practices? How can I learn what a Sunni Muslim does? How can I learn what a Hindu does? How can I learn what's significant so that I can really respect and care for my patients, and affirm them? And the same on the faith leader side. I do a lot of work with faith leaders and training on religious scrupulosity. And it's, again, to the point, I've never heard someone say, oh, I don't want to know about OCD. A lot of times it's a lack of understanding. And as soon as we start to have these conversations, there's a really big desire to support individuals in congregations, to support clients. And before shifting, Justin, I wonder if you have any thoughts about the misconception piece too, and how we might address that.
Yeah, well, on the practical side, one important piece is that I think whether it's with a clinician or clergy, but especially on the clinician side, because I speak from that angle, that if there's an actual problem that comes up, it usually boils down to two things. It's a problem of assessment or a problem of assertiveness. So just to be clear, those problems happen in every good therapeutic relationship because it's a human process. So naturally there, especially with scrupulosity, where OCD focuses on faith practices, beliefs, religious traditions, rituals, etc. The core of it is the obsession, the intrusion that I'm being irresponsible. I need to do this in a certain way, or I'm missing something really, really, really significant. So when taking this to a clinician or clergy, and if there's a misfire, okay, well, maybe there's been an issue of assessment. If the advice and feedback is being given from another person or another case that doesn't apply, or another belief system, that's an issue. So talking that through is really important. But the same on the client side, many times there can be just that lack of assertiveness naturally. And so just on the practical side of things, back to the communication piece. Rarely do I, or if I could say we, discover that there's regular issues that come up consistently for folks who actually really try it. So people who go to a therapist who's trained appropriately in OCD, ERP, CBT, etc. And then also on the clergy and faith side as well, that is trustworthy, has a good foundation, fill in the blank. Like rarely do those of us on the inside here where it just doesn't work out, or it was such a misfire that a person's beliefs got completely trampled. Now, fears, of course, will come up around those things. So that's just kind of the practical side. And really, I just want to highlight, I think that the classic issue, classic barrier is faith communities seeing OCD as a faith issue rather than as OCD. Of course, it will involve topics of faith and topics of faith that don't even have to relate to OCD. And that's many times not the clinician's role. Maybe talking about that is fair, but that's not going to be the clinician's role typically to address that. But I think the number one issue is conflating faith and OCD as the same thing. And I just don't think it is.
No, Justin, we've done quite a few talks together with the title of religious scrupulosity as an OCD issue, not a faith issue.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a significant piece that I hope folks walk away from this conversation tonight with. And as I'm sitting here flipping through all of the amazing comments and dialogue, and I just do want to know, I mean, if our panelists look through, we have amazing comments saying that Justine, Alex, Justin, and Val are all rock stars and are really giving folks amazing insights. So thank you all for that. But I also see a couple comments about the intersection between kind of treatment and spirituality and faith and practice. And it's something I wanted to ask these panelists, in part because it's selfishly my favorite topic. So I'm doing my research right now is focused on noting that OCD is not a faith issue, but reimagining ERP as a spiritual practice on the way to reconnect with our faith in a value-driven way. And I'm spending a lot of time looking at that across faith traditions and how actually by engaging in ERP, we can stop, quote unquote, worshiping the OCD and actually reconnect with the divine in a way that's meaningful for us. And I wonder where this group might see ERP or treatment, evidence-based treatments for OCD as a way to reconnect with faith, as opposed to the opposite that we often think. Often there's this fear of, oh, I'm going to be doing this exposure that opposes my faith, when it's really not that. It's about opposing the OCD to get back to your faith. So I wonder if this group has thoughts on either what that process looks like for you, or clinically with clients, how ERP has actually helped get back to value-driven faith.
Really simple one that I emphasize pretty quickly with folks is that compulsions, at least some of them, can oftentimes be pretty easily identified. Pretty much everyone I work with can admit that X behavior or thought process is compulsive. Maybe not all of them, and certainly not all of them to start, but beginning there, if we label, okay, if this is compulsive, so you started your prayer and typically you'd spend 10 minutes, you might take 20, but you're not going to run 3 hours late for work if you're not compulsing. Is it fair to say that you would like to work within that limit of not praying so that you're late to work? And most people can say yes. And so therapy helps folks to really break these things down and look at it in that sense, and really just kind of come to agreement with some of those things. A lot of the stuff we have to figure out as we go along, but most everybody knows right off the bat at least a thing or two or three that is problematically compulsive. If you get rid of compulsions, you begin to arrest the cycle of OCD. OCD thrives on compulsions. If you're not compulsing, you're subclinical with OCD. And it's a longer or shorter journey depending on severity, depending on comorbidities, depending on any number of factors, willingness, etc. But if you cut out some compulsions, you'll start to see at least a piece of improvement if you don't feel it automatically. And that's a really easy equation to work with. The person doesn't have to get behind everything if they can just get behind that.
I love that. Thank you, Justin. Go ahead, Val.
Yeah, I think on the upside of OCD, if there is one in ERP, I think it really taught me compassion and empathy, because with me having the health issue, I spent the majority, if not all of my time, sitting in hospitals and waiting rooms and different clinics and all of that. And it humbled me too, because it made me realize, especially from a Christian point of view, I want to be known by my love. I don't want to be known by saying, "Oh, that person has this," or, "What's wrong with that person over there?" And it just taught me that I'm not walking in their shoes. So who am I, to judge? Because all that stuff I was feeling about being judged, and not being heard and not being seen, I learned that myself by looking at other people's issues. And it was during those times, I think, when I was struggling from a faith perspective, that it drew me closer to God. It drew me closer knowing that that could be you over there, or 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 this could be going, happening to you over here, and that so often we draw that line in the sand where we take our stance. Well, I'm a Christian and I believe in this, and I'm not going to therapy because uh, God's not going to like it and all of that stuff. And then on the other side of the fence, I was dealing with, "Oh, you're crazy, to even have faith." You know, uh, what I'm saying? So it was kind of two-sided. So that's kind of what it taught me, the ERP, putting me out there in the community and seeing other people, that it just humbled me greatly, that we're all in this. Sickness is unfortunately a condition we all will get to experience. Some are different, but having that empathy and that compassion, that I don't know what's going on in that person's life, I'm gonna pray for them. And that has helped me um, with the with feeling I got something out of the ERP, the positive side.
Thank you, Val. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Justine or Alex? Yeah, I saw Justine first. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just quickly, with respect to my own treatment journey, I think one thing ERP really taught me was that it kind of actually peeled away, or allowed me to kind of examine in a healthier way what I was hoping to get out of my kind of religious involvement, my faith community. Because I think in engaging in it from an OCD lens purely, I was actually engaging in it in a really kind of shallow kind of way that I actually didn't like when I kind of started to think about it, right? So, it was, fearfully, reading scripture compulsively in the middle of the night to try to find justification for X, Y, or Z. When I started to engage in treatment, I realized, that's not helping me with my mental health. That's, actively, feeding the OCD beast, but it's also not how I want to be engaging in my faith tradition. Like it was out of this, "Oh, but what if," rather than what kind of relationship could I build with this faith community? What kind of presence could I be in my community or with my family, or that kind of walking your faith tradition, as it were. Those kinds of things weren't happening because I was really acting in service of OCD and not in service of any God I believed in, any kind of value system that I believed in, right? It was in service of the OCD. So it was kind of a good way to think about what I value in terms of my religious beliefs and my religious community.
I want to take a soundbite from that. And every Thursday I present on my research on OCD and faith and ERP in a spiritual sense. And I have such wonderful colleagues, but some that don't fully understand what we're talking about with the significance of treatment and how that can actually bring us closer to our faith. And I literally want to take what Justine just said and play that for everybody on Thursday. So thank you.
I can pop in on Thursday if you need. Let me know.
Bring it. Come on with us.
Okay.
Yeah, cracking knuckles.
Let's go.
Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, so I've been recently learning a brief little bit of the kind of snippets about halakha, which is Jewish law, based on a variety of different older and newer sources. And I do it a little bit with my dad every night. And something that we're learning about recently is this idea of if you are to improve yourself and to understand, each different situation that happens in your life and different hardships you experience as ways and messages to improve, and how to respond to whatever happens in life, and difficulties in a meaningful way. The number one thing that you have to start with is self-compassion, and understanding the incredible brilliance of the soul that you've been given in the image of God. And I think that with OCD, it's been very hard to sometimes be able to find, myself, and in some ways to compulsively, I really compulsively put blame on myself, and struggled with some of these things. I think OCD has helped me to be able to recognize my potential and recognize my, just my ability to do good things. And it also has helped me to live a life such that I actually enjoy engaging in faith practice. And there have been rabbis, certain authorities who have actually said, the whole point of faith is not to make it so burdensome that you can't love it, but it's about love and enjoying it. And I really think that challenging the OCD is just a strategy, just like any other thing. And Maimonides actually put it pretty well, I think, in his 8 chapters, where he talks about someone who's has a sickness of the soul. And really, I think OCD and therapy is a strategy. It's not my fault that I have these urges. It's not my fault that I have these challenges, but it's recognizing now that I have these challenges, what's the best way for me to proceed? And I think in order to work on making myself the best person I can be, that starts with taking a strategy to help with my OCD, and through that, to strengthen my faith, and to also strengthen my resolve to challenge my OCD through maintaining hope and love with my faith.
Amen. That was beautiful.
Wow, Alex.
Mhm. I hate to say that we are like at the close of our time, because I feel like we could have this conversation for the next 4 hours, which is why we have one of these every other month. So we will definitely have to actually continue with this panel, with this specific conversation sometime in the near future. And I tried to weave in questions throughout. I know there's some things that we didn't get to. I do want folks to know that we care deeply about your questions. We have an OCD mailbag where we put out answers to questions every month. So we'll make sure to address those and get back to you. But I know we're a few minutes over and it's Valentine's Day. So sorry, panelists, but I do want to give everybody just a second, just a little blurb on closing out. If there's something that you want to leave folks with, yes, need a 2-hour bonus, Matt. Absolutely. Is there anything that you would like to leave folks with tonight, whether it's on advocating on faith and OCD or stigma, treatment, or even self-compassion? What words might folks need to hear? Go ahead, Val.
Oh, I was just going to say, what a wonderful way for all of us that's on this panel and all of us who are in the audience to express love on Valentine's Day. To take the time out to say, I'm thinking of somebody besides myself. So I'm very encouraged. Alex, I'm going to have to rewind this video and take that little clip of what you just said and literally write it down and keep it for myself. But so I want to end with a feeling of hope.
Yeah, and that's an
Happy
honor.
Valentine's Day, everybody.
It's an honor to hear that from one of the greats, I think. Yeah, I mean, as you referenced my idea of hope, I think thinking about your idea of love, loving myself, loving others, really, I love what you said about not judging people in similar ways that you want people to not judge you. I think that's something that that's very important for me in many ways in my academic career and just in general. And I think that, using values to really strengthen all these resolves of hope and, really thinking about how, if we stay true to ourselves, stay true to our values, to our faiths, to hope, life does get better. And, even when it's hard to kind of imagine it in the moment, what we do really does make a difference. And especially with therapy, there's a whole lot of good that can happen.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much. Justine, do you have any closing thoughts tonight?
Just say what a lovely gift it's been to get to spend this time with all of you. Arguably better than some overpriced flowers that I also would have said yes to, but this is good too. So thanks.
Thank you, Justine. And Justin.
Yeah, I think looking for a way forward, starting points. I'm intimately aware of the fact that so many things can't even be covered in a live stream of 1 hour, right? And so many things come up, even just for an individual in their therapy. If I spend 15, 20, 30, 40 sessions with someone, so many things can come up. That's a number of hours. And it can be, OCD is a master of finding the problems. I talked earlier about being the disorder of disorders when it comes to fear. So start simple. Start with something that is good and go from there. And I'm just super encouraged. Just want to say thank you to each person on the panel here tonight.
Thank you all so much. And I'm getting all teary because I get really emotional looking around and just seeing the passion of this work and getting to work with so many great humans here on this panel, but also in the chat tonight, and all of you, and the way that you are encouraging us and encouraging one another, and I know encouraging your communities. So thank you for being here. I'm going to share just a couple quick closing reminders, but please don't leave, because some of them are how you can continue to get involved in this work, which is really important because we want you to be involved. We want you to be a part of this community. So want to note a couple things in terms of live streams. Tomorrow, there is an Ask the Experts with a special guest, Fred Penzel, tomorrow at 12 Eastern and 9 Pacific. So that should be a really great live stream with both Chris and Liz. I also want to note that we have a Faith in OCD conference coming up on May 1st. Registration is going to come out next month. We are working hard behind the scenes on that conference, but please go ahead and put that on your calendar, block out May 1st, because we want you to be a part of that. And we would also love for anyone interested in this work to sign up for the Faith and OCD Special Interest Group. I'll make sure that we drop a link to that in the chat right now. And it's really neat leading up to the conference right now. This wonderful group is doing some different themes every month around advocacy. And everyone in the group has a chance to advocate in ways that are meaningful to them. That might be speaking, that might be writing, that might be painting, something that's meaningful to you. And right now, our February theme relates to faith and uncertainty. So you're going to be seeing some things rolling out about that throughout the IOCDF platforms. But in March, we're actually talking about faith and self-compassion. And we're doing some special work around that, which also came up tonight. So if that's something meaningful to you, please sign up for the SIG, and we would love your voice as a part of this work. And then finally, this live stream is one of many. You can see the entire schedule of future streams at iocdf.org/peace of mind. You can also view recordings of past live streams, as well as watch our hosts answer your pre-submitted questions, OCD mailbag that I talked about, on IOCDF's YouTube channel. Remember to like and subscribe to get notified when live streams are scheduled. And as always, if you need resources, please visit the IOCDF. So thank you all again so much for being here. And again, I'll just close by saying these are meaningful for me every time. Everything that we get to do in community together is really meaningful, because I felt very broken in my own life with OCD for a very long time. And I deeply, oh my goodness. Okay, no, we have to see the puppy. That is literally the most joyful thing of faith, is having puppies as a part of live streams.
I thought that was your husband barking for a bit. I didn't realize you had a dog.
That's Blue. Yeah, the grandkids' dog. They don't know how to keep her in the crate.
I love that. But yeah, just in closing, I want folks to know, I always think, I don't believe that God created the brokenness that I experienced as a part of OCD, but I do truly believe through our faith that we're able to find beauty in treatment, to find beauty in the midst of wandering maybe through the wilderness or wandering through these really, really hard periods. And while I do not particularly like my experiences with OCD, like so many folks mentioned tonight, I wouldn't trade my treatment journey for anything. I'm so thankful for the person that I get to be, for the things that I've learned from treatment, both in life and in ministry, and the chance to be surrounded by so many of you in the chat, and by Justine and Justin and Alex and Val and so many doing this work. So I am so glad to be on the journey with all of you. Please sign up to participate in all the things. And I hope you all have a beautiful Valentine's Day filled with love and compassion for others, but also for yourself. Thank y'all.